Joining me now live via Skype to discuss this and much more, I have Olumide on the partner, Tax and Regulatory Services with Deloitte. Good to have you on the breakfast show this morning.
Good morning, David, and thanks for having me.
Now, Olumide, this is a surprise twist of fate we are having at this point in time. For so many economists, they could almost bet their last naira that we're going to record a higher surge in terms of inflation. But the National Bureau of Statistics surprised everyone with a gradual U-turn. Is this the start of a reversal in terms of our inflation rate? But it's questionable, taken for the fact that the same market fundamentals still remain. How do we marry these two reports, the reality and the expectation?
Yeah, thanks, David. It is a pleasant surprise. Indeed, people had concerns last month and expected things to get worse, perhaps beyond what we had in January 2017 when we had 18.72. But it's important to know that this is not completely unexpected for some of us. You would note that inflation is a supply-side phenomenon. And what you would consider is the fact that there has been several interventions on the part of the government, including the CBN, both at the MSME level and also a 1 trillion dedicated to the Manufacturing Intervention Fund. What you're seeing now is the fruit that is coming from those, several interventions by government. If you also observe the Purchasing Managers Index released by Islamic IBTC, strengthens further, it's 52.9. So that kind of provides a lot of comfort that we are in the right direction. I must agree, though, that we are not completely out of the woods yet.
Now, Olumide, you're in London right now. We are seeing inflation as a global phenomenon. But do you think for Nigeria's situation, so many prospective recoveries hinge on vaccine deployment? But at this point in time, Nigeria's context is a little different. Do you think we are gradually seeing a plateau, reversing the spike rate at this point in time?
Yes, I think we're starting to see the curve flattening for inflation. But again, we need to be very careful. There are still some very fundamental issues which still needs to be addressed. We still have the insecurity issues which needs to be fixed. We are still dealing with, infrastructural challenges, which of course affect the supply chain and drives inflation. And we still have a significant component of our inflation being imported inflation. So, there's still a narrow path to navigate carefully. So I'm not sure we're completely out of the woods yet, but I agree that we may have turned the corner. But there are still issues to consider. There is a possibility of a rise in pump price of oil that would impact the supply chain of food, which is the principal driver of these inflation figures. And so if that is not carefully managed, the inflation could still spiral out of control. Similarly, the NERC has indicated willingness to effect a minor review of power tariff in line with the multi-year tariff order sometimes in July. So if these are not carefully managed, we may see some further deterioration. But if properly managed, yes, we may have finally turned the corner on inflation.
Let's now also assess some other signals we are having from this report, looking at the fact that composite food index also grew with a little margin of 22.72% from the 22.95% recorded in March. But going to the markets at this point in time, having a 1,000 naira note, this does not really translate to real terms in terms of what people still buy at the markets. The prices are surging. Up until yesterday, I still had to buy a kilo of chicken, and I was surprised at the fact that the rates are going higher. So do you think this food index you're also seeing in terms of the drop at this point in time would also signal or translate to a gradual drop in terms of food prices? Still having at the back of our mind that we need to now reconsider conversations around new baskets of food production.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fair concern. First, you need to note that the numbers we see is aggregate numbers, and I think it will differ across different markets. But again, it's just a matter of time. You would find it reflected in the local markets around us. Again, provided those, delicate issues are well managed. I'm talking about things like the potential, pump price increase, power tariff increase, and also insecurity. If those are well managed, it's just a matter of time it will trickle down to individuals' pocket. I think we have a general challenge with the value of the naira, and I think that's a separate conversation, in itself. We need to talk about how can we strengthen naira. We need to do a lot more import substitution. We need to see how we can export more and earn more dollars. So that the issue around the dollar and the naira is a different thing, but it directly impacts the value of the naira. And of course, it impacts what you and I are able to do with the little naira we have in our hands.
And Olumide, we're wrapping up our conversation at this point in time now. Just going by the macroeconomic environment, you've made mention of the indices that also fueling the current state of the economy. We have the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria expected to meet sometime next week. It's a countdown to all of that. Do you think we are also going to see either a retention, tightening, or loosening of the rates? Because now the CBN has been pushed to the wall, and also the conversation around fiscal authorities doing much more.
Well, so I suspect that they may retain what they currently have now, which is 11.5% monetary policy rate and 30% liquidity ratio. The primary role of the CBN includes, that of inflation control. So I think we are not worse off from where we were, earlier in the year, when they had their 135th meeting in March. They held state, and I think, I don't expect any different in the 136th meeting that we'll be having 24th and 25th of this month.
Okay, thank you very much for your time on the breakfast show this morning. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Olumide, and then we continue to keep our fingers crossed. We've been speaking with Partner Tax and Regulatory Services, Deloitte, and we hope that much more is done to ensure that we have the economy well cushioned. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thanks, David. I hope so too.